that. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has kicked off this election year this morning with a speech urging voters to hold on to the flickering hope that life can get better if Labour wins power. Joining me right now is former advisor to Gordon Brown when he was both Chancellor and Prime Minister, as Professor Michael Jacobs. Very good morning and a very happy new year to you, Michael.
Happy New Year to you, Julia.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Well, look, the Labour leader's been speaking earlier this morning, just as we went on air in Bristol. Let's have a little watch and a listen to a clip of what he had to say about, well, the hope that Labour's going to offer after 14 years of of the Conservatives in power. Here's what he had to say.
This year at the general election, against the tide of cynicism in Westminster, the gauntlet of fear the Tories will unleash, and, most of all, the understandable despair of a downtrodden country, I will ask the British people to believe in it again. I will say, you're right to be anti-Westminster, right to be angry about what politics has become, but hold on to the flickering hope in your heart that things can be better, because they can. You can choose it. You can choose the hope of national renewal, the responsibility of service, what politics can and should be, and you can reject the pointless populist gestures, the low-road cynicism that the Tories believe is all you deserve.
Pointless populist gestures. I mean, was there any substance in that, Michael? I mean, that was all a bit pointless and posturing, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so. We didn't hear new policies. That wasn't the objective in today's speech. What he was trying to do was to tread a rather difficult fine balance. On the one hand, Starmer wants to say, we are going to be different. A Labour government would be different. We'll make changes to a country that nothing works in anymore. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to sound as if he can offer too much because the British public won't believe him. When Labour promised huge change, radical change in 2019, the reaction of many voters was, we just don't believe that you can deliver that. So
I don't think they wanted
kind
a
of
lot of the change that was being offered.
Between not offering anything, which he clearly doesn't want to do, he wants to say Labour will be different, and offering too much. And I actually thought this morning was quite a good performance.
I mean, he's not the world's most gifted speaker. I think we can all safely agree on that. I mean, I don't think Rishi Sunak is also, you know, someone who sets the world alight with his speeches, but I think is a rather easier listen than Keir Starmer. I think this is going to be a real issue for voters over the next, whether it's a few months or all the way to the autumn for a general election, because frankly, I think they're going to bore the electorate silly with speeches. But I mean, those of us who are required under our employment contracts to pay attention. I mean, all he had to say, he said, this New Year message of hope. He said, this is an election that could change the character of politics. He's urging voters, as I say, to hold on to the flickering hope that life can get better. And it's interesting, with that clip we played, you're right to be anti-Westminster and angry about what politics has become. But you talk about being different and change. What would be different under a Labour government? There's the same finances, you've got the same world, impact in terms of what's going on in the Middle East, the Ukraine war. God knows what happens with China and Taiwan in the future. All of the economic impacts and the defence implications for that. You've still got the same number of doctors and nurses. You've still got the same tax receipts, pretty much. You can't go spending a fortune like Labour did under the Blair-Brown years, when there was just money coming out of their ears with all those new tax receipts and oil and all of that. So what can practically change in Britain for the average voter from having Keir Starmer sitting at the desk in number 10 or having Rishi Sunak or indeed anyone else?
I think this is the challenge, and I think you've rightly questioned it. I think the tone of government will be different. I do think that over the last few years, we've seen very chaotic governments. We've seen 5 prime ministers, Conservative prime ministers in recent years. We've seen a lot of cronyism, those terrible contractual fraud, basically, coming out of government. We've seen the misbehaviour, the scandals and so on. I think the tone of government would be very different under Starmer. He's a serious man, not, as you say, very charismatic, but serious. He's done proper jobs before, unlike most recent Tory prime ministers, and I think he will run a competent government. But you're absolutely right to say the real challenge for Labour, and I think in the general election campaign this will come up often, is what precisely will be different. Starmer has made a lot of progress from his own popularity point of view simply by pointing out how incompetent the government has been.
Yeah, I
but
don't
in
think
a
we
general
needed
election
it
campaign,
pointing out.
well, indeed, and he's been highly benefited by that incompetence. You know, the Tories have done his job for him in many ways. In a general election campaign, he will be asked what will be different, and he has to show why NHS waiting lists will come down, why crime will come down, why homes will be built. Why schools will be improved, why we will have fewer small boat crossings and so on. And to do that, he'll have to show not just that his policies are different, but that the resources will be available.
But they won't be.
You know, the sums of money which Labour is promising to spend on the NHS at the moment are rather small, and they won't in practice make a big dent. They'll make a small dent, a big dent in the National Health Service problems. And because they have prioritised fiscal responsibility, as they call it, not borrowing too much, not raising taxes, they will be constrained in resource terms. And I think that will be a real challenge for Labour, which is to say, not just is the tone of your government going to be different, which I think is clear, but will the substance of it be, will I as a voter really notice a difference?
Well, that's the thing. And I think there are going to be a lot of very high expectations about, you know, public pay settlements and money for the NHS, for schools, for house building, for whatever, crime, you know, dealing with crime. And that money doesn't exist. And they say they want to go for fiscal responsibility. They won't have any choice. We saw what happened when we had sort of, you know, uncosted spending by when Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng announced that budget, and the markets didn't like it, and the markets definitely won't like it when Keir Starmer does that. You say this is going to be about, you know, a change in tone and about competence. Is there any reason to believe that Keir Starmer and Labour would be any more competent? I mean, we're not seeing much competence in the Labour government running Wales at the current time, where pretty much every stat you compare with England, it's worse. But also, Keir Starmer has a pretty poor track record. He's Mr. Flip-Flop. I mean, that is one of the allegations that the Tories can throw at him, and no doubt will throughout an election campaign. I mean, who knows what he believes on any topic? This is a man who claims that he thinks that some women have penises. I mean, that makes you either a liar or an idiot, both of which should preclude you from standing and running in public office. He supported Jeremy Corbyn, a man who, you know, has no values, I think, akin to the average British voter. And of course, he fought to overturn the Brexit vote. Again, that's something that Brexit voters like me think is unforgivable, anti-democratic. I'm stunned that Labour are, despite the abject incompetence and failures of the Tory government, that Labour are so far ahead in the polls. And I wonder whether that lead is going to disappear quite a lot when he actually has to stand on, you know, in a debate and actually say what he's going to do. Because I don't think he's going to do anything.
Well, we don't get the leaders that we would ideally like. We get the leaders of the two major parties, and they are the alternatives. And a general election is an incredibly concentrated moment. Yeah. There are only two, in practice, parties on offer as the potential UK government. There are some other parties you can vote for. But the UK government will be either Labour or Conservative, and you have to vote for one or the other. And in the end, it is a binary choice between two imperfect leaders, always is. And so the question that the British public will be asked to answer at the election, whenever it is which of these two leaders and which of the two programmes that they're putting forward do you think is the least worst? Not the best. That's not in practice what we've got here in very difficult circumstances. We're not going to have an ideal government of any kind. It's Starmer versus Sunak. It's Labour's approach and policies versus the Conservatives. The Conservatives have a record to run on. What Starmer will be saying is, this is what we're going to do. And I'm afraid, from your point of view, Julia, all the things that you've raised as doubts about Starmer, they won't matter very much. In the end, the British public doesn't really care what Starmer said in order to become Labour leader, which is where he's accused of flip-flopping. They won't really care about what he did when he was a minister under Jeremy Corbyn. They'll be interested in what he's offering the public for the next 5 years And in
That's a
those,
good point.
and in
People will
that
be looking
case,
forward. Can I ask, I just want to get, I've
yes,
only got a short bit of time. Can you, if you could answer this briefly? I mean, yesterday we had other parties, Liberal Democrats and also Reform UK, both giving the press conferences as well. Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, warned about Labour victory leading to an economic crisis and what he called Starmageddon. It's a nice word. It will probably catch on. But basically he said there won't be a deal with the Tories this time round. They're going to stand in every single seat. That could, according to analysis, hand the Labour Party another 35 seats from which the Tories would otherwise win. Lib Dems, meanwhile, have said they won't ever go into coalition with the Tories, but they could go into coalition with Labour. Do you think both of those things together from the minor parties, that actually will pretty much make it a near certainty that Labour will win? Briefly, if you will.
I do, actually, yes. The Reform Party is out to destroy the Conservatives. Richard Tice has been pretty clear about this, and they can do so. There are enough seats where the Reform Party wouldn't win, it's not going to win any seats at all, but where it can take enough votes from the Conservatives to leave Labour in those constituencies as the winning party.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are going to do exactly the opposite, which is not to work hard in those seats where they are potentially the challenger to Labour, but to concentrate their efforts in the seats where they are the challengers to the Conservatives. And there are a number of seats where the Conservative majorities are small enough that a decent Lib Dem vote, again, the Lib Dems won't win those seats, but they could give Labour those seats. They might win one or two, but in general, they will give Labour those seats.
Thank you. We'll have
we will see tactical voting.
Yeah, we see more of that, don't we? I'm going to have to
parties.
leave it there. I'm so sorry. I do apologise, Michael Jacobs, but it's been fascinating talking to you, Professor Michael Jacobs, former advisor to Gordon Brown, both in number 10 and number 11. Thank you for that.